Now, Dunsparce is the true definition of missed potential. What do I mean by that? I mean that Dunsparce has an amazing move pool. Like most normal types, it learns so many great moves, so versatile, and its ability is Serene Grace, which is even better. Like, to give you an example of what Serene Grace does, if you were to use Flamethrower, for example, you would double your chances of burning the opponent. If you use any move that has a secondary effect, you double your chances of it appearing. Dunsparce has so much going for it. The problem? Its stats are god-awful. They really are. Like, it's a shame. Dunsparce deserves an evolution so bad. If it did, if it just got better stats with an evolution, it would be a competitive masterpiece, for lack of a better term. It'd be such a good Pokemon. It's just such a shame that it got cheated out of being such a wonderful Pokemon, because it has so much missed potential. If you want to pick one up, remember that there's not that many normal types in Colosseum, so maybe you don't want to use a Furret. Maybe you could try it out. I'm just going to warn you, even though it's got really great moves, it's going to be tough for you to use. Gligar is interesting. It is a flying ground type, so very interesting type. Immunity to ground and electric, which is very out there, I suppose. But in all seriousness, Gligar has some interesting moves such as Slash that you're not really going to find on too many other Pokemon. So maybe if it's got some moves, it's got some interesting starting moves in Colosseum. So if there's any moves on it that look appealing to you, you'd be hard-pressed to find those moves elsewhere. So it might be kind of cool to you. Only downside is Gligar does not evolve in Colosseum. It's a shame. If Glysaur was in this game, I would highly recommend grabbing it, but unfortunately you're kind of doomed to mediocre stats. Because it doesn't evolve. But hey, maybe you still want to pick it up. Granbull! This is an interesting Shadow Pokemon. Once again, most of the normal types in Colosseum I find are pretty interesting. Granbull is basically having that Furret early in the game with Strength, combined with Stantler having Intimidate with a much beefier attack stat. And because of that, I'm going to say that I would go on the record saying that out of the Pokemon that you could realistically use and purify in the main story, Granbull is probably the best of the normal types in Pokemon Colosseum. That is... Honestly, no, I will go out and say that out of anything that you can realistically use in the main story, I think there is one more normal type, but we don't get it until the final area, and it's like the third to last battle in the game that we get it in. So I'm going to consider that not realistic to be used and purified in the main story, so yeah. Out of any normal type we've seen so far, Granbull is probably your best option. It is awesome having Intimidate in a regular battle, having Strength to start off, and then once you get its happiness up with you, you can just delete Strength and give it Return, which is 102 power with same type attack bonus. Qwilfish is actually kind of an interesting Pokemon. It does have Surf, much like Croconaw and Quagsire. Its stats aren't quite as good as Croconaw, and its type is not quite as good as Quagsire. It's not the best of the water types that you can pick up, but it does have Poison Point, meaning that if you physically attack it, it will poison you. If you make physical contact with it, it will poison you, which is nice. It's definitely a Pokemon that is unique out of what you can pick. Again, it's not going to be winning any awards in the way of stats, but it's certainly unique, and people might be drawn into Poison Point. Shuckle is quite possibly the best mixed wall in the entire game. It has roughly 230 on both of its defense. However, it's strictly a wall. It is probably the only wall you're going to find anywhere in Colosseum that is better than Fortress. But this thing is strictly a wall. You can't do much else with it. Especially not in Generation 3. You get some better moves later on, but for the time being, only use this if you want an amazing wall for these last few battles that you're going to be conducting in Colosseum, because we're near the end of the game here too, so keep that in mind. Heracross! This thing, if you have only 5 members of your team and you're looking for a 6th, and you want something that can deal out a lot of damage, this is your guy! Heracross is a beast. One of the best physical attackers in the entire game. Unfortunately, it does not yet know close combat because 4th generation hasn't happened yet at this point in the series. So that kind of sucks though, but it's got some great moves like Reversal and Brick Break in its starting moveset, so you can't really fault there. Plus, it's a few levels away from learning Mega Horn. I believe level 52 is what you need to get it to. So if you're willing to train a little bit, maybe you might want to pick up Heracross before doing those stadium challenges that I did. Yeah. I can't really say anything but good about it. Guts is a fantastic ability as well, especially for an attacker. So yeah, Sneasel. It is a very offensive ice type. Unfortunately, does not evolve in Pokemon Colosseum. If it did, I would seriously suggest that you pick it up, because if it evolved, you would have one of the best sweepers in the game. Aside from that, it does its job pretty decent. It comes with Screech, as you see right there, which is a pretty good move to have for a physical attacker. Only downside is that, well, Ice is a special attack in this game, so it doesn't get you benefits from Ice moves. You know, just because good moves for supporting it didn't exist. But hey, if you want something to do a lot of physical damage quickly, it's decent. Ursaring. It's... For those that watch the anime, you know that they use it all the time in all kinds of gags and all that. But in the games, when we're talking about the games here, it is a very strong attacker. Nothing else to it. Its primary methods of fighting are that it has a 130 attack stat, and it could potentially have guts for its ability. Actually, no, it outright does have guts for its ability in this game. I forgot Quick Feet didn't exist yet. So, if you can get a status infliction on it and then just attack like nuts, that's typically where it shines. The downside is that it's very slow, and it's not perfect in the defensive way, in defensive ways. For a normal type in general, it's pretty dang slow. It's not like Snorlax slow, but it's close. And for that reason, it can be kind of tough to handle. It's not impossible, mind you, but it can be a little tough. Slugma is kind of interesting. It's got the ability to get Flamethrower, which is kind of nice. So if you want to grab that, I suppose you could get it for that. Just be forewarned that the move in the first slot is not always available to you. Is not available to you right off the bat. And that the move in the fourth slot will take a while to get. So, yeah. Anyway, Slugma is interesting. It's got a sleeping move of Young, which can be kind of nice for people that want to snag a lot of Pokemon, which I'm going to be doing. I already have a Fire type, though, so I don't need it. Plus, I kind of prefer Quilava over Slugma, but yeah, that's kind of Slugma in a nutshell. Very slow, but got some options for some decent moves, I suppose. Piloswine is, well, it's interesting. Ice and Ground type. Ice is the worst defensive type. It is individually, Ice is weak to more types than any other type. However, Ground's kind of nice, giving it, you know, an immunity to Electric, although it does grant it a weakness to Water that it wouldn't have otherwise. It's meant to be more bulky, kind of like defensive and offensive, and unfortunately, it does not evolve into Mamoswine in this game. Mamoswine did not exist when Colosseum was released. So it's another case of something that I think could be really nice to pick up if it evolved, but unfortunately it doesn't, so it's not really a Pokemon that I pay much attention to. Plus, on top of that, there is another Ice type coming right up immediately after this fight if you want to weigh your options with that one as well. Remoraid! Okay, so first off, a bit of a warning. Remoraid is a tough Pokemon for me to tell you to get. Now, this is not because it's a bad Pokemon at all. Remoraid is usable in some ways. The reason why I say it's tough to recommend, it starts at level 20. I don't know why they give you a Shadow Pokemon that's level 20 this far into the game. The very first Shadow Pokemon you snag is level 30. Why is it, like, really late into the second town? We have one that's level 20. So, although Remoraid can be kind of a unique water type, it gets some really unique moves like Octazooka that lower accuracy after it evolves. Although it's very unique, it's just, you're gonna have, putting it bluntly, because Shadow Pokemon can't level up at this point in the game, you aren't going to be able to use this thing. It is useless for a while. It might get useful later on, but you will not want to use this thing right away, is what I'm saying. Delibird, Shadow Pokemon! This is a flying Ice-type Pokemon, but honestly, I don't know why you'd ever want it. It is abysmal in terms of stats, really shallow move pool. I don't know, maybe you could think of a reason why it would be useful, but personally, I don't see one even for Colosseum's limited options, because I guess even Sneasel, like, with it not having that great of moves to promote being an Ice type before the physical special split, I don't know, I can think of more things that Sneasel can do, because Delibird, I mean, it's doing Attract right here, it's got Present as well, I don't know. I'm not really sure, I can't really think of much about it. This is a very useful Pokemon. If you want something that can take special attacks very well, Mantine is your guy. It's got some kind of unfortunate weaknesses, like a quad weakness to Electric and, of course, a weakness to Rock, but hey, Gyarados has that type as well, and Mantine is a fantastic Pokemon. I like it quite a bit. Only warning about this if you want to pick it up. Even though it makes a pretty good special wall and it's immune to ground types, which is always nice in double battles because that means you can use Earthquake when it's out, This thing has a catch rate of 25. It is the hardest Pokemon to catch as of this point in the game. So this Pokemon will be harder for you to catch than any Pokemon we have seen thus far. So just warning you that you might want to save before this because this is the toughest challenge you have been given as of this point. So, not saying that it's impossible, but yeah, although it's a very good special wall, just be warned that it's very difficult to catch. If you didn't want to use Croconaw or Quagsire, this thing's pretty good. It's more defensive than Quagsire, as I'll say that much, though. It doesn't have as good of a type as Quagsire, but hey, it's still a good Pokemon. Skarmory is interesting. It's a wall, even though it doesn't look like one based on its design. But unlike Fortress, it's able to do other things than just wall. It has a fantastic immunity to ground, which is great for any wall, definitely, with how good of a move Earthquake is. And on top of this, you also have the fact that it doesn't have to worry about having a lot of... It doesn't have to... You also have the fact that it has other options besides just walling. It's not bad at doing damage either, and it can take out, you know, fighting types with its flying moves. It can take out rock types with its steel moves. It can do a lot of things that most steel types just don't really have the luxury of doing. And if you're looking for a wall that can do other things besides just defend, unlike my Fortress, it's a little tiny bit squishier than my Fortress, but it more than makes up for it in other things that it can do besides just being a defensive wall. So, for that reason, Skarmory, I feel like, is a fantastic last Pokemon for us to catch before going up there to fight Nascur. So, I'm not going to use it on my team, but I highly, highly would recommend using it on your team if you don't already have a 6th member by this point, which you should, but just in case you don't, Skarmory is there to get your back. Plus, it's level 42. You can't really argue with that level for this late in the game. Houndoom, who is a pretty decent special attacker, not going to lie. It gets better later on when moves like Dark Pulse get introduced in Diamond and Pearl, but, you know, even though it didn't exist here, it's still a pretty dang good Pokemon. It's, doesn't really get to take advantage of that Dark type all that well, but, you know, if you want to have something to do special attack damage, it's pretty good. Stantler. This Pokemon is interesting. Normally, I would say it's incredibly mediocre, and you really shouldn't bother with it because there's much better normal types. And even in Colosseum, yes, honestly, I find Furret to be more useful than I find this to be. But I can't really say as much mean stuff about Stantler as I normally would because A, it's got Intimidate, which not too many Pokemon in Colosseum do, and that's a fantastic ability for double battles especially, lowering both your opponent's attack stats. That makes up for its kind of lackluster defenses. Not only that, but it has Hypnosis in its starting move pool. That's really useful in a game where you're snagging a lot of Pokemon all the time. So, honestly, Stantler, while it's not the greatest normal type, I can be a bit nicer to it than I ever have been and say that it does have some interesting options if you want to grab it. I mean, having both Hypnosis and Intimidate covered in one Pokemon is nothing to sneeze at in a game that's entirely double battles where you're catching a lot of Pokemon all the time. Smeargle is quite possibly the most unique Pokemon that was introduced in 2nd generation. It is simultaneously has the biggest moveset of any Pokemon and the smallest. Smeargle only learns one attack, Sketch. What does Sketch do? It allows it to steal an attack permanently from the opponent, or rather copy it, not necessarily steal it. And because of that, he has given it Double Slap. Yeah, wonderful. But all in all, Smeargle, while it has crummy stats, if there is a strategy you can dream up, Smeargle is capable of doing it. There is absolutely no limits when you are working with a Smeargle. It can do anything. The sky is the limit with Smeargle. If you can find a Pokemon in the game that has the move that you want, just go battle it. It's especially helpful when items like the Versus Seeker exist and all that stuff, as well as Match Call and all that kind of stuff, because you can just look up the movesets online of various AI team members to find exactly what you want. I think there might be a database or two on the internet that does tell you easy locations to get moves for Smeargle, but God, I remember people in tournaments that could use Smeargle so well. There are people that would give it like Dark Void and like double battle tournaments and that kind of stuff. It was crazy. Granted, that is an inescapable breaking of Sleep Claws for some, but God, like, I saw Smeargles with... Well, probably the best move to give Smeargle actually would be Spore. Spore is a 100 accuracy sleeping move that only the Paris family can learn normally, but of course Smeargle can learn any move, so there you go. It's It's really, really cool. I like Smeargle a lot. The only downside about training a Smeargle is sometimes you gotta save reset to get what you want, but hey, hardly a complaint when you're working in a main series game and you can just save before battling any trainer. Not like this game, where you can't do that.